live on YouTube. And it just takes a minute. There we go. All right, and I need to mute this or we'll be here in double. I haven't figured that one out yet. Not to hear double. Okay, very good. Here we are. All right, so welcome everyone, and we're here for our weekly deep dive into Course in Miracles, the Manual for Teachers, and we are in the section number 20 called What is the Peace of God? And so let me get that up on the screen. And here we go. So always remembering we're here only to be truly helpful, and we're here to represent the Christ who sent us all. And we don't have to worry about what to say or what to do, because he who sent us will and does direct us. And I am content to be wherever he wishes, knowing that he goes here with me, and I will be healed as I let him teach me to heal. We're on section 20 of the Manual for Teachers. And I think we finish paragraph 5 last week? I think we kind of got caught up. So let's take a look at paragraph 5 in case we didn't get it all last week. Who would like to read paragraph 5?
I'll read it.
Okay, thank you, Rafi.
Living is joy, but death can only weep. You see in death escape from what you made, but this you do not see, that you made death, and it is but illusion of an end. Death cannot be escaped because it is not life in which the problem lies. Life has no opposite, for it is God. Life and death seem to be opposites because you have decided death ends life. Forgive the world, and you will understand that everything that God created cannot have an end, and nothing he did not create is real. And this one sentence is our course explained. And this one sentence is our practicing given its one direction. And in this one sentence is the Holy Spirit's whole curriculum specified exactly as it is.
All right, does anybody have any insights into this? Rafi, please feel free.
Well, the first thing that came to me is several of the masters who always, in one form or another, using various synonyms. I was never born, I don't exist, and I can't die. This, and they're talking about this thing because it's an illusion. And Robert Adams puts it, I was never born, there's no me to be prevailing, and I can't go anywhere, or there's nowhere I will never leave. They all say it pretty much the same way. Jesus said it in his way. But how many times you got to hear it before you finally give it? How many times do I got to hear it before I finally say, okay, this isn't what I am? And so no matter what happens to it, doesn't matter because it's not real.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rafi. Brooklyn, please go ahead.
Namaste, mighty companions. It just nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.
About it. You can't say much more than that, but I'm sure we will. I think it's the remembering that that's the truth. You know, that the remembering that is the truth, that this whole idea of death being just a complete farce, a belief that somehow we can cease to exist, and that existence, that what God created could end. It's ridiculous. And there I hear again, when I read this stuff and when you're reading it, I hear Jesus laughing. You know, he is saying, man, you know, here in this one sentence, our course has explained everything. death is not real. Please, Nicole, go ahead.
Oh.
Are you frozen, Nicole? I think Nicole is frozen. Karen, why did, oh, there she is.
Here I am. Sorry, I ended up off the screen. This, wow, this is beautiful. I just was sitting here meditating before we started. And I just saw a quote from Muji actually, which was saying that thoughts have no power. And the only power that comes is from our believing in them and identifying with them. And I was experienced when I woke up this morning a little bit of seeming pain in some areas. And I'm reading this now, and these seeming things that seem to end with death, these illusions when we identify with the body, and such as ailments or things that, like as we get older or whatever, all this kind of stuff. And this one sentence here, forgive the world and you will understand that everything that God created cannot have an end, right? So anything that we think is going to end, like with the death of the body, it is not real. God did not create, and so it is not real. So it's just really, just reading that, I was like, wow, yes, it's just a thought. That shoulder is a thought, right? It's a thought, and that God did not create it. It's not real. And even a thought about it has no power unless I believe it and unless I identify with it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. That was beautiful, and I so appreciate everything you had to say. Karen, please go ahead, and then Myrna right after her.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole, and thanks, Lynn. I do think about the preface, like Lynn shared, that nothing real could be threatened and nothing unreal exists. But I love how he says, forgive the world, and you will understand that everything that God created cannot have an end, and nothing that he did not create is real. So it's the forgive the world part is, for me, the most important part, because I can't understand anything unless I forgive it. And like Nicole said, those thoughts, I give my thoughts power, I give my thoughts power. And, after I left today, after Pal Talk, I had to drive my mom to an appointment, and it was a far, long drive, and then driving her home and then driving back here. And, I didn't stay for dinner because she didn't thaw anything out, and all these thoughts, I was tired. I was frustrated. I was feeling guilty because I didn't stay and have dinner with her. All these thoughts, forgive the world, forgive my thoughts, and I will understand that everything that God created cannot have an end, and nothing he did not. So it's always for me about forgiveness. And I really love that he reminds us of that with that, because it, like Nicole said, it's always our thoughts that need to be forgiven. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Beautiful. Myrna, please go ahead. Nicole, did you put your hand back up again? Okay, I wasn't too sure. All right, go ahead, Myrna.
Yeah, just last Monday, I was doing a Zoom session with Susan Michelle, and just so happens that lesson 177 is a review of lesson 163. There is no death. The Son of God is free. So when we recognize that there is no death, and that death is just an illusion, then we can be free. Because lesson 163, death is a thought that takes on so many forms. and it's unrecognized, and it brings fear, anxiety, doubt, anger, faithlessness, lack of trust, all of these things that we seem to live with because we are venturing into the ego's playground all the time, aren't we? And that's what we kind of come up with. And once we realize, you know, those emotions, when they do come up within us, and just be aware to let them go, because that's death as well, you know. And we want to be free. We have to let go of all those different little things that come up that fall under the category of fear. And there's only fear and there's only love. That's it. And where do we want to be? So we have to concentrate and practice being in that state of mind where we can just let things go. And that takes awareness. So.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Myrna. Yes. Nicole, please go ahead.
And it's just really hitting me now about life, what we're being told here. This is just absolute gold. You know, that life is eternal. It is God. All right. It's not this coming and going. You know, we identify with this idea of our life or life as being all these seeming things taking place on the screen, but they're illusions. They're not real. Life is eternal. It is God. So, wow, you know, it's not real. This is just beautiful to see. Life is God. Life is our reality, is our truth, as God created it. Like, wow, that's it right here, right now. And nothing else is real. Thank you.
Marlene?
Oh, I was asking Myrna to go ahead.
Okay. You know, I want to just read this from my own book, Private Lessons with Jesus, about death. I was just looking at it, and I really like some of the lessons better than others. I really do like this one. There is no death. The Son of God is free. God's love gently guides you. There is no death, for you are infinitely free. Death is but a fearful idea contrived to keep the illusion real. Death is the thought which originated from a loveless idea. Fear and death are synonymous, perceived as the final step into unknown pastures of darkness and loss. The word death has no real meaning. Death cannot be real because it is love's opposite. When the body ceases to be, we simply lay down our defenses and walk with him in gentle wakefulness and know that death and fear were the greatest illusions of all. To let illusions go is to recognize God's eternal light. If we are unlimited eternal beings of light, this alone tells us that death is the stranger here. That really got me.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Thank you.
pointed me in a very good direction, you know.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. Does anybody else have any comments or thoughts about, you know, this life and death thing that we think is so real and so important? And I think this is the crux of everything here. You know, and once you understand that death is not real, you're free. You can do anything. Your life is not bounded because you're not looking at an end to it. You're just seeing that it's eternal. And that's an incredibly beautiful thing. Nicole, please go ahead.
I'm simply going to take this opportunity to teach myself here, because I already knew there was no death. This is something I got and understood, but I'm experiencing an epiphany reading this around the comings and goings, anything which can come and go, anything, that's not real. It's not real. And that's what he's saying here. You know, it's it's the same. It's an extension of the realization that there is no death. It is that anything that can be born and die or come and go or arise and fade away is illusion too, all of it. But just I'm sorry for repeating myself, but I really, really want to get this one, just allow it to really sink into the totality of my being. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. And I accidentally muted Dove. Anyway, thank you so much, Nicole. And yeah, wow. Yes, take this moment, get this, because this is essential. You know, Jesus knew death wasn't real. You know, you can know it too. Please, Rafi, go ahead.
Well, as soon as I read the paragraph, resistance came up in my mind and said, okay, well, just, you know, that, you know, you were born and you're going to live a while and you're going to die. So just humor them and go along with it. Okay. Don't make any waves. But it was resistance and resistance. I caught it and I welcomed all the resistance up and let it go so I could get it back into this peaceful, realistic state of being rather than get caught up in this body mind thing. And, but I thought it was really cute how it came up right away. Don't believe this. Don't believe it. Bye, 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 bye. Yeah, right away. Thank you. Love you. Bye, bye.
Oh, that's amazing. Yes, that's it. Yeah, and honestly, think about this. You know, some of us have read this course over and over and many, many times, and not seen things, and come back later and look at it and say, how did I not get that when I read this thing before? And what exactly it is, Rafi, it's resistance that says, this is for somebody else. This is not for me. Jesus doesn't really mean this. This is not really what's going to happen. This is just a symbol. This is just a story. We have all these ideas that come up about what we think is happening here, that are resistance from the very words that he's saying here, that if you actually knew this, you could not be nothing but joyful. Living is joy, and that's, you know, that's what we should be experiencing in all ways. And why aren't we experiencing joy? Because of resistance, just what you said, Rafi. It's saying, I don't deserve it. It's, I'm not good enough for this. God really doesn't love me. I'm not a good person. Whatever things you think, you know, whatever beliefs you have about yourself or your what you are, or what you should be, or what everybody else is and what they should be, all of those, that's all resistance and saying to you what Jesus is saying here is not true. And you know, that you just have to recognize either this is true or it's not, and I choose to believe it's true. I better darn well get myself in a place where this is my experience, not just a story that I'm telling other people that the Course in Miracles is about, but something I'm really experiencing as well. Does anybody else have anything to share? And you can share even if you're not on camera, so. All right, so let's go on to paragraph 6. Who would like to read paragraph 6?
I'll read it.
Hey, thank you.
Paragraph 6. What is the peace of God? No more than this: the simple understanding that his will is wholly without opposite. There is no thought that contradicts his will, yet can be true. Now, let me read that again. There's no thought that contradicts his will, yet can be true. The contrast between his will and yours but seem to be reality. In truth, there was no conflict, for his will is yours. Now is the mighty will of God himself his gift to you. He does not seek to keep it for himself. Why would you seek to keep your tiny, frail imaginings apart from him? The will of God is one and all there is. This is your heritage. The universe behind the sun and stars and all the thoughts of which you can conceive belongs to you. God's peace is the condition for his will. Attain his peace and you remember him. Wow. This makes me feel majestic. What is the peace of God in this? Simple understanding that his will is wholly without opposite. So basically for me, we talk about the 12 steps, thy will be done, not mine. This is spelled out in perfection, saying, I don't have to think about my will. I don't have any will. My will is God's will. If I would choose to walk along this path, there's only one will, that's God's will. There's no contradiction. There's nothing opposite from it. And if I'm to stay in what seems reality, non-changeable, always the same, always here, then it's got to be about God's will and not mine. My will is selfishness, self-centeredness, fear, insecurities, all kinds of crazy stuff. God doesn't have that in his will. So if I want God's will for me, which I do, God's peace for me, which I do, then I can attain this. And when I attain that, I don't forget God. I remember God. I always remember God. I'm just learning how to remember God in my attitude, my actions, and my behavior, not just in my philosophical overview. So a mighty will of God. Yeah, I need some of that. Thank you.
That's beautifully shared, Rico. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's that very shift that you're talking about, that we're looking to experience, the shift from I know it's true to I know it's true. and that's a very subtle thing. But you're intellectually, you can say, yep, I agree, it makes sense to me, I'm going to do it. But to actually experience your life just flowing with God's will is it is a huge gift. Karen, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Rika. That was beautiful. And it is about, our experiences here and how we treat other people, and how we treat ourselves. But this reminds me of, he's talking about the peace of God and God's will without opposite, and the will of God. He talks about this throughout the course, but the one that really comes to my mind is in chapter 8, section 6, the gift of freedom. In paragraph 6, he tells us that God's sons are equal in will, all being the will of their Father. And he said, this is the only lesson I came to teach, that freedom cannot be learned by tyranny of any kind, and the perfect equality of all God's sons has to be recognized when we see each other as equals and we see each other the same. God's will is not only perfect happiness, it's perfect equality. And it's seeing my brother as myself. And it's remembering that if I'm judging my brother for anything, I'm judging myself first, and I'm projecting it onto him and blaming him for something that he hasn't done. There's nothing out there. There's nothing out there. And this is the peace of God. The peace of God is perfect equality without opposite. It's knowing that, his will is my will, happiness, peace, guiltlessness, sinlessness, being kind to each other, patience, all the characteristics of God's teaching. I mean, it's a tall order. It's a tall order, and it's every single moment of every single day, and noticing when I'm not, and ask for help to please help me to see this through the Holy Spirit. Because he says in the paragraph right before that, that, forgive the world and you will understand that everything that God created cannot have an end, and nothing he did not create is real. In this one sentence is the Course explained. And then he says, in this one sentence is our practice given one direction. And the Holy Spirit's curriculum is one direction. He talks about that also throughout the Course. It's one direction, one. It's not any split in the mind. It's not, wishy-washy. It's not thinking with the ego. It's one Holy Spirit, 100%. And that's not easy. I mean, that's what he keeps telling us, but he's patient and he's teaching us patience. So it's beautiful when we can, like Rico said, experience it and actually be it in the world, and not just talk about it, but actually be it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen. Rico, please go ahead.
And Karen does what she always does. She touches my heart and leaves footprints on my soul. Thank you, Karen, for sharing. When you were talking about this is a tall order, it just resonated me so much, and I agree with you. But when I go into the stillness and the silence, to myself, I say, and this is not about you, Karen, it's about me. That's the excuse I need to not hit that 100% mark. Say, this is a tall order. This is rough. I don't know about this. I'll try. But really, there's only God's will. If I really want to be a part of that will, which I am, whether I want to believe it or not, it's really not a tall order. The tallest order for me is to get rid of them damn attachments I have and living in those illusions. That's the tall order. Being in God's will, if I can get rid of that other stuff, I think I'll be okay. But when you said that, I got such a vibration. This is a tall order. And I thought about that because that's what I tell myself sometimes. And then I watch my mind and I catch myself. I say, what's so tall about it? So thank you for bringing that forth. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I needed to hear that too. Thank you.
Thank you both, Rico and Karen. And wow, yeah. This is so beautiful. He's really saying, why would you seek to keep your tiny, frail imaginings apart from him? And this is what we do. We try to keep it secret. And I don't mean, we're trying to hide things from God. We're hiding things from ourselves. We're not even looking at what is my motivation? Why am I doing this? What, we think, things happen to me. I had trauma, bad things, well, look at your mind and think about these things. Why are you letting, some past experience lead you to be afraid now, lead you to feel small now? It's something like the work with Diedrich Wolsack and the 6 steps of choose again. The first steps are really looking at, where did I ever get that idea about myself? That I'm unworthy, that I'm small, that I'm stupid, that I have a bad temper, whatever things, you think are defining you as a person, that are making you less than the Holy Son of God that you are. And you ask the question, that's what the six steps is. They ask the question, when was the first time that you ever had that feeling? And you start looking back at your life and thinking, well, I felt ashamed of myself when my mom yelled at me in front of strangers. And now I'm nervous when I'm in front of strangers because I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake. And my whole life I go hiding from things because I believe something about myself that happened when I was 3 years old. And until we can look at these things and find, where did this come from and why do I believe it's true? And the feeling of unworthiness and shame are probably some of the most compelling experiences that we can have as humans. Shame is like the lowest level, according to Dr. Hawkins, of our experience. And what are we hiding from God? we're hiding the things that we're ashamed of from God. We're hiding the things that we don't want him to see, the tiny things that make us less worthy, the things that we did, the dime I stole from, my cousin on, Christmas or whatever, I spend my whole life believing I'm a whore, or believing I'm a thief, or believing I'm a this because of some little thing that happened years ago. And I'm hiding from God because of it. I'm saying I'm not worthy because of it. And he wants us to look at every single one of these little tiny things and to give them over and let go of them, and when we do that, we recognize our fullness as the Son of God. We recognize our connection with our Father, and we recognize that like I said, nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists. What we are is far beyond, he's the universe beyond the sun and stars, and all the thoughts of which you conceive. It belongs to you. Everything belongs to me, to us, what we are. And we're not experiencing it because we're hiding our shameful little thoughts. And, I know people who work in the 12-step programs, are very aware that you can't be hiding your thoughts, or else you're not going to get very far in a program. And, I'm not encouraging anybody to talk about their experience in 12-step. I'm just saying that, if you're in that kind of program, that being honest is the most important thing. And this is all Jesus is asking us. If you become honest, you will have the peace of God. Anyway, Brooklyn, please go ahead.
Comes to my mind, be vigilant for the kingdom of God. And when we could get a glimpse of the kingdom of God, we really don't want anything else. And we know the difference of what the kingdom of God is. You could tell the difference between ego and God's kingdom. And God's kingdom is his will, which is also our will. But the blocks to love's awareness, the habits, the thoughts, and sometimes the thoughts aren't just our own, the collective thoughts. And by changing our mind, we could change your collective thoughts too. And that's, being in line with God's will. I step back and let him lead the way. That's what God is the strength in which I trust. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Brooklyn, Myrna, please go ahead.
Yeah, that I think when I read the Course in Miracles and did the lessons, the lesson that struck me most, I think, throughout the entire course, I've mentioned this to Dove, we've done our sessions, and that's lesson 93, and that addresses what you were saying when, you think you are the home of evil, darkness, and sin. And it says, if anybody could know the truth about us, they would be recoiled as if from a poisonous snake. I mean, that's what we think. And that's what you were sort of, touched on. And those are the things we hide from God. But God knows this, and he's telling us right here in this, in this lesson. That's what you think. You think all those things about yourself, but none of that is true. And I think the part that got me is that if anybody, you would be so horrified, thinking that this is so that you would want to rush to death by your own hand, thinking that this too is impossible. So you can't even kill yourself and get away from it. And this is what it's telling me, really, that we have this illusion about ourselves. And when you were talking about this, Lynn, we go back years into our early days when we were criticized, perhaps, and we thought less and less of ourselves, I think, as a result of growing up and not believing who we really are. So lesson 93, again, I bring that into the picture because that's what it reminded me of.
All right. Thank you so much, Myrna. Yeah. So beautiful. And lesson 93, I love that lesson too. And in fact, when I first read that lesson, that was when I actually knew, because I started the lessons in January, the first year, and I was going through hell, HELL, I'll tell you what. And so when I got to that lesson and I was suicidal, I was actually planning to kill myself and had, the means and was, ready to do that very thing. And not just this lesson, but when I got to this lesson and I read it, lesson 93, I recognized, oh, Jesus knows me. Jesus knows what I'm thinking. And so it must not be that bad. It must not be that bad. And this course literally saved my life. So
I just wanted to add that lesson, when I first read it, I cried. So obviously it does bring out, takes all that hidden, the hidden littleness, about ourselves that we feel. It just addresses that. And I don't have to hide anything, like you just said. Jesus knows that about us. So what is there to hide? You don't have to hide from that anymore. So I agree with that. Yeah.
thank you, Myrna. Anybody else want to share anything on this last paragraph about what is the peace of God? All right. Rafi, please go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that happened to me before I started studying any of this was that every once in a while something would come up, and when you're a single parent, something horrific comes up that out of nowhere, and you're not prepared for it, or whatever else is going on, career or health thing. And then somebody said something to me, and of course there are no accidents, that God never gives you more than you can handle. And that flipped a switch. So no matter what circumstance shows up, or from that point on, no matter what circumstance, a situation, whatever shows up, I know that first of all, I'm backed by a divine protection, divine providing, divine guidance, and that this too shall pass. It's easy. It's much easier to handle in your mind, which always goes to ego mind, always goes to a worst case scenario anyway. You can handle this, and it happens and all of a sudden, what was so incredibly catastrophic became a lot easier to handle, and then was dissolved.
Exactly. Thank you, Rafi. And yes, I mean, every time when you look back, you recognize, oh my gosh, why was I so upset about that? It really, you do see that it's nothing once it's passed, and it hasn't destroyed everything. You're like, oh, I was overestimating what was going to happen. Anyway, please, Brooklyn, go ahead.
The peace of God is always offered, but not accepted. The guilt stands in the way, like you said before, Lynn, which I experienced. Why me? I don't deserve this. Who do I think I am? But and the guilt, we don't deserve this, but the peace of God is always there, just waiting for us to accept it.
Absolutely. Yes. It's what we are. So, why we resist it so much? Why? I know, just, kill me here. Why am I doing this to myself? Anyway, anybody else on the peace of God? Are we ready to move on? Oh, Sharon, please go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because we like being separate. That's just the truth. I mean, unless we can really say that and really mean it, we don't get anywhere, because telling the truth in this process is so important. I mean, if you look, I've been a student of Ken Wapnick's, also like most of us. And, he has said that over and over and over again. And in the beginning, when I got the course, I wanted freedom more than I wanted anything. So I was kind of like a bliss ninny to myself. You know, so, well, there's no world, but I had so much. And what I see in this mind is I've had a definite a couple shifts from perception, but there's still the guilt that is in this mind. It seems like there's layers. So why do I also, I heard you mention the 12 steps, Lynn. In the 12 steps, we get a sponsor, because one thing I know for this mind, I wasn't willing to tell anybody everything that I believed about myself. So I got a sponsor. And one of the things that I do in this process, wherever I am, is I meet everybody where they are. Because I understand that growth, even though there's no time, it takes time, because the beliefs are fixed and hardwired into our consciousness. And, the guilt is something that Ken has brought up. And if you look at the book, it's so obvious to me that, I think we all want to be enlightened like yesterday. And when Karen shared that it's a tall order, it certainly is a tall order. We are going to sometimes get upset. We are sometimes going to hear things that are not necessarily pleasant. I mean, for me to be honest, this is my dream and you're all in it, but it's still my dream. I am the dreamer and I can change it, but only as I am progressing. And I realize readiness from spirit had to be there. And that's why I'm very, very a little bold when it comes to Course in Miracles things, because I do feel sometimes people are really from the head and they're taking the book and they're saying, this is what it says, and you're not doing it. And, that kind of stuff. That's not what I want in my life. I want to be authentic. So yeah, that's all I have. Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. And yeah, I mean, it's nobody's business to say this is what's true and you're not doing it right. That's just silliness. Why in the world, would anybody think they had the authority to tell another Course in Miracles student that they were wrong? Not that I haven't done it. I've done it myself in the past. And, I see now how silly it was and how silly it is. It's not up to me. None of my business. Please, Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of things. First, I want to thank Sharon for what she just shared. And, I do agree that first we have to meet ourselves where we are and be honest with ourselves. And I hear everyone saying that we have to be honest with ourselves, because we're here to heal our minds through forgiveness. And he's telling us to forgive the world, and you will understand that everything that God created cannot have an end, and nothing he did not create is real. But we have to forgive ourselves first. We have to look at the beliefs, we have to look at them. That is forgiveness. It looks, it waits, it judges not. And it is not always easy, but it is doable. It is doable. And the other thing I just want to share, Lynn, is I want to thank you for what you just shared about, you're wanting to commit suicide, and that lesson 93 really helped you. And I mean, that's beautiful. That's really, really beautiful. And it really touched my heart when you shared that. So I just want to thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Karen, very much. Nicole, please go ahead.
I was just thinking when they're talking about correcting each other or telling that our brother is wrong, and I was thinking at the first thought that came, which was ego, was, Jesus does that all the time though, and then it's like paused on that, and it's like, no, he doesn't actually. He never tells us we're wrong. He tells us we are as God created us. What he does is he explains the ego thought systems and belief systems which are wrong, and he tells us that we can decide wrongly, but also that we can decide otherwise. So it's true. He doesn't tell us we are wrong. But he does have no qualms pointing out the errors in our beliefs. All right, thank you.
Yeah, it's sneaky how Jesus does it. And that's what's so beautiful about the way this course is. What he does, he asks you questions. He asks you questions. How would you feel if this was the case? Why would you seek to keep your tiny, frail imaginings apart from God? He asks the questions. First, he makes a statement and says, this is a really important thing for you to know and to do. And then he asks the question, why aren't you doing this? But he never says, you're all messed up. He just is pointing out to us through in a very gentle way our behavior and how we're acting and seeing things. And if you read the course and look at it, he is constantly asking questions, not not just saying, you're all messed up. He says, what would you feel like? How would you feel if you had the peace of God? What would it be like? And then, if you had it, what would you do with it? He's asking it so that we can ask the question, answer the question, oh my gosh, what would I do with this? How would I feel about this? And then you put yourself in a place where you can learn something, you can see something. That's what's so beautiful about this course. And he does a lot of laughing too, because you can tell he's kind of giggling about a lot of things, because he knows that as soon as we get it and we're in on the joke, we're going to be laughing too. The instant that we get it and we're in on the joke, we're going to be laughing too. Not because it's funny, but because it's crazy to believe it could be true. It's just, I don't know. All right. So we have a little bit of time. Nicole, did you want to say something else, or your hand's still up? I'll put it down for you. Okay. All righty. I never know. All right. So let's look at the next section is, what is the role of words in healing? And really, this is pretty important. And we're going to spend some time on this next week for sure, because we are talking about words. When you pick up A Course in Miracles, it is a book full of words. And somehow or the other, those words are meant to cause a shift within us that brings us from ignorance to knowledge. And it's not because of what the words mean, but because what the words do to us as we read them, as we absorb them, as we listen to them, and as we integrate them into our lives. So the words, I told you, I used to get really upset when people would say words to me, like, you're a fraud, or you're fat, or, I would think they were trying to kill me, and the fact is, they're words, and they have whatever meaning we give to them. So let's look at paragraph 1, and we'll just probably get a chance to read and talk about this a little, and we'll start again next week. Who would like to read paragraph 1? What is the role of words in healing? Please, Brooklyn, go ahead.
Strictly speaking, words play no part at all in healing. The motivating factor is prayer, or asking what you ask for, you receive. But this refers to the prayer of the heart, not to the words you use in praying. Sometimes the words and the prayer are contradictory. Sometimes they agree. It does not matter. God does not understand words, for they were made by separated minds to keep them in the illusion of separation. Words can be helpful, particularly for the beginner, in helping concentration and facilitating the exclusion, or at least the control of extraneous thoughts. Let us not forget, however, that words are but symbols of symbols. They are thus twice removed from reality. Oh yes, this speaks to me. Like you were saying before, Lynn, I know when I open the course, like, woohoo, but a lot of there are people who get stuck on words, and there's no language that's really non-dualistic, no language. So when you have people in a non-dual community saying, you used us, we, oh no, they can be distractions from what's being said. Like when we talk to each other, it's more than words, we're connected more than words. It's just, yeah, that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Brooklyn. You're cracking me up over here because the thought that the people in the non-dual community would argue about words when words are only necessary because I think there's a you and a me. And I think that we're separate beings and that we have to somehow or the other bridge a gap and communicate in some way. And so words come into the picture, or body language, or whatever comes into the picture, or tone, or all these things come into the picture. That's all the caused of our belief in our separation. And if we were not separate, we would not need words. So for non-dual people to be arguing over words, which they should all agree are not even necessary, seems really silly. But that's my thought. Does anybody have any thoughts about this paragraph they'd like to share? We have a couple minutes and we'll come back next week on this very theme. So yeah, I love that he says God does not understand words. God doesn't hear words. He doesn't understand words. Because they're only necessary for separated people, separated beings. Yes, Karen. And then Nicole.
Yeah, what comes to my mind is speak less and ask for guidance, speak less and ask for guidance. And then when you do speak, it's coming from a place of love. That's all.
Thank you, Karen. Yes. Please go ahead, Nicole.
I remember when back in 2000, I first came into a 12-step program, and A Course in Miracles first came into my life at the same time. And prayer, I've been brought up Catholic. I really struggled with this idea of prayer. And in fact, it was after saying a Catholic prayer, because it mentioned somewhere in A Course in Miracles, Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world. I remember praying that before I went to sleep, and that was the first time I woke up and I heard Jesus talking to me. But the thing is, I never knew what to say. So it was early days. I hadn't read things like this yet, but I was told that God hears the prayer of my heart. It didn't matter. I didn't even need to have words. So I got into the habit of, before I went to sleep, I would more so just I would talk a little bit too, because that kind of seemed to facilitate or help me to put things in perspective, such as, the realization, me worrying about these things isn't going to accomplish anything or help anything, and in the letting go and letting God kind of thing. But I experienced this prayer of my heart and started to experience like silent prayer, you know what I mean? And I experienced and knew that my prayers were heard. And I remember hearing, I think it was Kenneth Wapnick one time saying that God didn't hear our prayers. And I got so upset. I was so triggered. I got so triggered. But I can kind of see what he was referring to. And and he's addressing this here when he's talking about how there can be contradiction. But, in Song of Prayer, which we did previously, we're shown how we are always in a state of perfect communication and communion, for we're one with God. But I read this and I just went, we were reading this before and I was just like, wow, yes. Oh, wow. That's what I got and understood, that we do not need to use words. It's beautiful. And Lynn, I just want to say thank you for your response before, to Lynn in relation to communication. You know, this illusion of separation where we think we're dependent on words and all these things, you know, it's funny in body language and all that, because these are beliefs too. And these are beliefs that are, we no need for. Anyway, thank you. Mwah, mwah. Love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you, everyone who joined us. This
Yeah.
evening. I'm so grateful for all of you, and just always so beautiful when we join together. And that's all Jesus is asking us to do. Join with your brothers. All right, you guys, I love you all.
Love you all. Good night.
Big hugs.
Big hugs to all. Bye-bye.